right. Good evening, everyone. I'm David Harris, class of 2017, and welcome to this week's edition of NextGen Presents. For those joining us for the first time, NextGen Presents is a series created by our NextGen Advisory Council in partnership with the Association Foundation. Our goal is simple: connecting graduates with graduates to explore careers, leadership, and lifelong learning. One of our greatest strengths of the Along the Line is the willingness of graduates to help one another. Whether you're a recent graduate, exploring your first career, or someone considering transition, or simply curious about a new industry, these conversations are designed to give you direct access to fellow graduates who have been where you are and are willing to share what they've learned along the way. Tonight, we're focusing on a very interesting core piece of this, management consulting, profession many people have heard about, but often fully don't understand. Our panel will help pull back the curtain by sharing what consultants actually do, how they enter the field, what skills have mattered the most in their success, and how the profession continues to evolve. Most importantly, we hope tonight is more than just an opportunity to learn about a career. We hope it's an opportunity to strengthen connections across the Along the Line. Please don't hesitate to introduce yourself in the chat, share your class year, where you're joining us from, and submit your questions throughout the evening. We'll leave time for audience Q&A towards the end of our discussion tonight. Okay, with that, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator, Evan Nadowski, class of 2008, partner at Bain & Co. and a member of our NextGen Advisory Council, but most importantly, a great friend and mentor for myself personally and a lot of us on this call. And with that, we'll go ahead and kick things off without further ado. As always, go Falcons, beat the Goats and beat the Mules. Over to you, Evan.
Hey, Evan, it's Chris Bennett. Sorry to interrupt. If you can hear me, you are on mute, and none of us in the audience can hear you. I think I have to be on.
Evan, can you hear us? You're on mute.
So I muted that entire time?
Yes, you were. That's okay.
We're going to start this over.
You look great, though.
Only 6 years into this, I can figure out Zoom. Goodness. It was really good, I promise that. David, thank you so much, and welcome, everybody. I'm excited to be here with such an outstanding group of fellow graduates representing Bain & Company, McKinsey, and Boston Consulting Group. As David mentioned, tonight's goal is to demystify management consulting. It's a career that's often talked about, but not always well understood. So we're going to have an honest conversation about what is consulting, how each of us found our way into this profession, what we've learned along the journey, and where we see consulting headed in the future. We'll spend a lot of our time tonight discussing a variety of topics, and we'll also reserve some time at the end for your questions. So keep submitting questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll get to them in a little bit. But for now, I want to meet our panelists. So as we go around the room, I'd like each of you to briefly introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about your current role, and share just a brief summary of ultimately what brought you to management consulting. Carl, let's start with you.
Thanks, Evan. Carl Groslin, I'm class of 2012. I was an acquisition officer for 8 years, separated 2020, went to business school, and then I've been at BCG for 4 years now. I'm a associate partner, and I do most of my work in operations, manufacturing, supply chain. And it's been awesome to be there. I didn't think when I was in business school, I joined consulting because I didn't really know what I wanted to do in the future, and that's kind of where vets naturally get pushed as you go through formal recruiting. And it's been just a great surprise of how much I've enjoyed it so far and how much I've loved it.
James, let's go to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Evan. James Hanley, graduated in 17, did a little over 6 years active duty as a contracting and acquisitions officer. I then went to business school, actually was connected to an outgoing Vets Club president that was headed to Bain, and he really talked to me about consulting in a way that made it make sense to me for probably the first time. So I ended up actually doing pre-MBA recruiting. So we can kind of talk about potentially a slightly different path. Ended up interning in Boston and then full-time here in Atlanta. Currently a second-year consultant at Bain, and have really enjoyed it. Largely, like Carl said, I didn't really know what I wanted to do in the private sector. And since being full-time at Bain, I've been able to see probably 4 different sectors and really get a feel for what different types of work can look like.
Kelsey.
Thanks, Evan. Hey, everyone. I'm Kelsey Richards. I am a consultant at Boston Consulting Group. I work out of our Washington, D.C. office, primarily with our aerospace and defense clients. While in the Air Force, I was an OpEx, intelligence, and acquisitions officer. I joined BCG through the SkillBridge program last summer. And as I was looking for what I wanted to do after the Air Force, I tied back what I enjoyed about the Air Force to where I wanted to go next. Meaning, as an intel officer, you're asked to look at pieces of data and provide a recommendation to a commander, right, on a way ahead and what you want to do. And I see a lot of parallels with that in management consulting. I'm no longer looking at signals intelligence, but I'm looking at market data and I'm providing this recommendation to a senior business leader. And I really found value in that type of work. And it's something that I wanted to continue doing moving forward, and been super happy at BCG. And I don't know, super positive experience, and happy to talk to anyone about a less traditional path, maybe with the SkillBridge program as well.
Tyler, bring us home.
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. I'm Tyler Jackson. I'm from the great country of Texas. Graduated class of 2018, played football at the academy. And I went through a business school route. I got here at Bain. I'm been here for about 10 months now. I went to Wharton Business School, and for me, coming out of business school, it was either banking or consulting for me. And the reason why I wanted to make that pivot, other than just to make a little more money, I really wanted to be a well-equipped problem solver. And I think management consulting, it gives you a variety of cases to work on, and you get to work with just incredibly smart people on solving the world's biggest problems for businesses who pretty much run the economy of the world. And that was important work that I wanted to be a part of. And yeah, that pretty much sums up.
Thanks, everybody. All right, Carl, you're first up. What is management consulting?
Yeah, it's a great question, Evan. I remember even when I was in business school and going through recruiting, I couldn't really get someone to explain it to me, and to a point where I could really understand it. The simple way that I think about it is, especially for the firms represented here, we are brought in, management consultants are brought in to help companies or public sector organizations solve incredibly difficult, highly complex problems that they've been trying to solve themselves and they have not been able to. And that can take a bunch of different, that can be something in AI, like everyone hears about now. That could be in operations and manufacturing. That could be growth marketing and sales. Pretty much any issue the firms here that are represented have experienced solving those in all these different industries. whether it be airline, aerospace and defense, CPG, anything like that. These companies need help, and they are bringing in these leaders that have these proven track record of helping these companies get through these very pivotal strategic decisions and help them. And I think the last thing I'd add is it's always on a very limited time frame. It's not generally considered like staff augmentation. It's, whether that be 2 to 3 weeks for a due diligence on, hey, should we buy this company or not, or 8 weeks on some sort of strategy study. But it is meant to come in and help them overcome sort of that hump, if you will, of that problem, and then put them on a path such that they can go in and execute on that strategy and solve it.
Tyler, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I like to. Here's how I explain it to my parents. Right, it's like, hey, if I'm a business and I need to go to the doctor is going to diagnose my problem. Well, I'm going to tell the doctor my symptoms. Then the doctor is going to run some tests, diagnose the problem, and then give me bedside manner on how to solve that problem. That's exactly what consultants do for the best companies in the world and some nonprofit companies as well. And we usher the companies on how to implement our recommendation. I think that's the most simple way that I explain it to my mom.
James, you talked a little bit about your path into consulting. Can you maybe get a little bit more specific? And I realize there's different ways in, but can you just talk in generalities, kind of if somebody's looking to get into a firm like the ones you all are at, what should they be thinking about? What does that look like? And ultimately, what advice would you give someone that wants to get to, say, be in your shoes a couple years from now?
Yeah. I think a big benefit of this session is really opening up the black box, right? Like my last year of active duty, as I was kind of starting to think about, okay, what would be next? It was kind of difficult to get information. One thing, it's something you probably haven't thought about for a while. So I would say the first step is just doing the research. There are YouTube videos, there are influencers that kind of talk about these career fields like consulting or banking or anything. And from there, I would say reaching out to people, a couple of years ahead of you from the academy or just friends that that have gone into the career field was super important. That was a big unlock for me. I actually reached out to David Harris about, going into business school and then what that looked like in prep. And there really is an exercise of kind of projecting forward. Okay, where do I want to be in 2 to 3 years, and working your way back and figuring out what those major milestones are for you. Unfortunately, it's a pretty tough career to pivot directly into. Kelsey is obviously a success story there as the SkillBridge programs start to take hold in the consulting firms. But the more traditional path is probably going to business school. So that's a 2-year investment and going through the recruiting pipelines there, interning, and then, returning full time. And that's what I did. But a bit of a nuance to that was like, I actually interviewed before starting class. And again, that was because I had a little bit of an idea of, what consulting was and what it took. And that kind of allowed me to bypass the normal fall recruiting process.
I might add to that, just so agree that it's in general kind of the 2-year business school route. And Kelsey, you should talk in a minute, maybe a little bit about SkillBridge and those opportunities. But even for business school, that's really, I would say, probably a 12 to 18 month process prior to that to get into the type of schools that these firms recruit from. So it's 100%. Really important to think backwards when you're thinking about separating or potentially you've already separated, you're in a career and you're thinking about pivoting into management consulting. It's really important to work backwards because there's just a lot of lead time to ultimately set yourself up for success. But maybe Kelsey, you can talk a little bit around SkillBridge, and also just the extent that you maybe talked to some firms about potentially entering directly in and what that looked like.
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, I joined BCG through the SkillBridge program last summer and then started full-time a few months after that. My entry via SkillBridge with BCG also was not an overnight decision. It perhaps was more expedited, than the traditional 2-year business process, but it does take time to tee up and plan, right? You can't teach yourself to case overnight. You can't network overnight. You do have to put a lot of forward thinking into, is this a good career fit for me? And is this something that I want to do? And if it is, how do I prepare? I would say the bar to entry was no different for SkillBridge hires than it is for any other traditional recruiting hire. You still have to be able to case with the best of them, show that you can, have that higher level thinking and those interpersonal skills as well. So just something to consider that you also have to meet the bar with which these firms are recruiting for, albeit maybe via a different process.
I can also add on to this just to add more color to how far in advance you have to think. I graduated in 2018, and by the end of 2019, I was starting to foster a relationship with Evan, knowing that I wasn't getting out of the military until 2023. So it took that long to sort of give myself the chance to get an opportunity at McKinsey, a Bain, or a BCG. And it's very and one of the reasons why it has to take that long, because casing is unlike any interview you've ever done. It's where you sort of have a mock problem or like a made up company who has a problem, and you have to demonstrate to the interviewer how you would dissect or solve that problem. And especially for vets, we don't get a lot of reps at this. And when we're competing for these limited slots with people who've been around business functions since undergrad, and where we may make up for our lack of technical skills, we make up for that with leadership and people skills. But during the case interview, it's kind of hard to show that. So you really have to like work hard at that and give yourself enough time to prepare, and also use your network.
Carl, let's go back to you. What academy or military experiences have translated most directly to your success in consulting?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is being able to solve problems in small teams and have those just change so frequently. Most of when you become a consultant or an associate, an entry-level contributor out of these, SkillBridge or business school or direct entry, you're put on a team, and most of your studies are on average probably about 8 weeks long. They're really quick. And so you might be, in an industry you know nothing about, call it CPG or a retail client, solving something that you know nothing about at the beginning, which is AI strategy or manufacturing throughput. And you are expected to go in and with a team and experts on your side, help this company solve a very critical problem that they've had. And so your ability to go in, get up to speed very quickly, within a matter of days, and then just go in and just start solving problems continuously with your team, asking for help where you need it, bringing in experiences that you have, such that you are helping them ultimately move the ball. And again, you might be gone in 8 weeks from now, but you are expected to have really done something significant for this company in that short amount of time. And so working with that small team and quickly solving problems, first just identifying the problem, working through it, asking for help, getting what you need, structuring it and communicating it out, making a decision, and then moving on. That sort of, OODA loop, as we all know, or that, if you will, is quite valuable. And what I pull upon, from my military experience, such that that's really what we're doing day in and day out.
James?
Yeah, I think communication is a big thing that you do get some reps on, just naturally throughout the military, learning how to kind of layer your communication. You wouldn't talk to an airman about something you need the same way that you would talk to a colonel, right? So kind of that structure to communication, both written and oral, I think is super important. That's something that I think I've definitely taken with me into consulting. It's been super helpful because as Carl laid out, our engagements can be really short. Time is really of the essence because you're having to do a lot in a short period of time. So being able to kind of communicate what you need, communicate where you are, communicate what roadblocks you might foresee that's kind of keeping you from getting to where you need to be is super important.
Got a question from the audience. And maybe Carl, I'll start with you, just given you have had the longest amount of time in consulting on here, but can you talk about the most challenging and or rewarding problem you've solved for a client?
Yeah, I mean, I guess 4 years is kind of long. I've never thought I would have been here 4 years, but it's been fun. Okay, so the most challenging and rewarding. So I've done a decent amount of work with our public sector practice, and so U.S. governments and whatnot. And I think for me, getting to serve the DoW on some of the stuff that I've been able to do has been quite rewarding, because I left as a captain after 8 years, and now as 4 years as a consultant and working in that space, I've found myself getting to have a really high level of impact still on something I'm very passionate about, and with the Department of War mission and what they're trying to do, to being able to go in and be present and communicate with some very, very senior leaders within the military to help them solve problems that I thought as a captain were unsolvable to some extent, has been awesome. And I never thought I would have that experience as where I'm at, and I still have friends and great friends that are majors and now become lieutenant colonels here for my year. And I have the opportunity to brief their boss's boss and talk to them and help them solve problems, and have them text and call me and ask for some advice. And that's been quite powerful for where I've been, and just to kind of see that level of impact.
Anybody else want to layer on?
I had a case recently. I'll speak about the most rewarding problem that I had to solve. I won't name the client, but it was a pretty big charter school network that focused on communities where I'm from, first-gen low-income communities, and that was rewarding to me. And part of the case was, one, going to their headquarters. I met the CEO, and just having a deep conversation with the CEO. That's another thing about management consulting. You get a lot of exposure to the C-suite of people who run, pretty important businesses. And another part of that case was to actually go visit a school, and I saw a bunch of little kids who looked like me, and it gave me a sense of purpose, because right before that I was on the private equity team, where I was sort of working with people who had a whole different set of privileges and problems. So being able to work with someone who serves a community like mine was very rewarding.
James or
I
Kelsey?
can hop in there, Evan. So to give a little bit of color, I guess, to the different types of engagements that we have, I was a part of a retainer team for a manufacturing company, and we ended up doing.
Sorry, James, do you mind explaining retain? Like when you say retainer, just what does it mean?
Yeah, that is fair. So we essentially were like a commander's action group, right, for the CEO. Like, we were brought in to execute on any of the CEO's kind of strategic priorities. 1 week we were working on org design. The next week we were working on post-merger integration. So kind of figuring out how this company would digest, for lack of a better term, a company that they had acquired. And one of the things that ended up being really, really impactful to them was fixing their customer service model. They had instituted a kind of smart inventory system that really broke that like foundational connection they had with their customers, who the large portion of their customers were kind of small construction businesses. And, these are people that were very used to working with like one person, right? So I have my customer service rep, I go to them, and now that relationship had been broken, and they were kind of given the runaround a bit. So, they were headed into their peak season, which is pretty much the summer months where a lot of construction work is done, and they needed a complete overhaul. So they kind of threw our team. We had our senior manager and probably 5 or 6 of us on the working team. And we had to completely remap their operations. We had to figure out from the software standpoint what tools were out there that they could use to better link back to regions and making sure that, if I'm a construction company in Florida, when I call, I'm actually talking to a customer service rep in Florida as well. And it was just really amazing to see how quickly we were able to get in, figure out what was going on, and actually enact some change that allowed them to reestablish that really important connection to their customer.
Thanks, James. A couple of questions in the chat from Drew Morgan, class of 18, related to just how everyone ended up at their firms. So, Drew, I'm going to combine your questions. The questions around considering Big Four versus MBB. So, for people that are on here, Big Four is kind of the big accounting firms that have consulting arms. So, KPMG, PwC, Ernst & Young, I guess I'm blank, Deloitte. And then MBB is McKinsey, BCG, Bain. I just want to caveat, there's a bunch of other firms. There's smaller boutique strategy firms. There's supply chain consulting firms. There's a broad array of consulting firms. So it is important to make sure, as you're going through this, kind of what aspects of consulting you're interested in. Management consulting generally refers to generalist strategy consulting. So you can work on lots of different problems. You heard Tyler talking about working with a school. You heard James, which is what he was talking about with kind of the inventory. Heard some of the problems Carl's talking about in terms of working for the government. But with that, maybe we just go around and everyone talk about what led you to the firm that you're at, and if you considered other firms or if you were very focused on the one firm you wanted to go to. So Kelsey, we'll start with you.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's a combination of what you're interested in, but also just the serendipity with timing. So when I was looking at recruiting for different firms and looking at SkillBridge programs, I also had to look at my network too, right? Because I think it was Tyler who touched on this. That's so important to help you recruit. And when I was reaching out to my network, I found a lot of them did just work inherently across MBB, and they had the perspectives and the help to offer to kind of vector me in that direction. And I liked what they had to say. And as I continued to have coffee chats with these folks, I liked the people I was talking with. So I would encourage folks to think about when you are recruiting and going through the interview process, sure, the firms are evaluating you, but you are also evaluating the firms. Would you work for these people? Would you work with these people? They will be your coworkers. So just something to keep in mind as you kind of assess what you're looking at across your various options and moving forward.
I'm happy to go next. It looks like Evan's lagging a bit. Yeah, so for me, how I ended up at Bain, sort of what Kelsey said, I think that was spot on. Timing has a lot to do with it. My year coming out, I recruited for all 3, but I did have criteria. I wanted to consider lifestyle, and I really wanted to do private equity. And at the time, Bain rolled out all of their pre-MBA recruiting. They did all of that first, and they gave me the first offer. And before I continue, it didn't matter what firm of the MBB that I got into, I was going to be very grateful for it because it is incredibly hard to get these opportunities. But when Bain gave me the offer first, I kind of stopped recruiting everywhere else. I didn't want to play the game because Bain at the time, and I think it's still true today, sort of leads the market with the amount and the variety of private equity due diligence that the firms do. And then also Bain has a very unique local staffing model. And I have a wife who I love to spend time with, and I kind of want to be nearby. I don't want to travel Monday through Thursday. So that was a big deal for me. And at Bain, you do travel, but not every case travels as frequently. So those were some things for me, and I didn't consider Big Four at all personally.
James?
Yeah, I can hop in there. I think for me, I started off with a pretty wide net because I really had no idea, even from kind of a sector or function, what I was most interested in. But as I really started to do some self-inventory and think about, projecting forward 3, 5, 10 years, like where I kind of want to see myself, I realized one of the main things was that I didn't want to work for the government outside of the government. And it may sound crazy, but I ended up recruiting for both Bain and McKinsey. And I think that's what really pushed me towards Bain. Bain is a little unique in that way, in that kind of by decree, we don't do federal government as a client work. It doesn't mean that we don't work kind of in the space, still work with defense primes and aerospace, but I didn't want to kind of show up and be the defense guy. I kind of wanted the space to learn something completely new and challenge myself in that. And that's kind of what tipped the scale in the direction of Bain for me.
Yeah, I don't know if I would add anything else really here, Evan. I would say, to have multiple offers across these, firms is obviously a champagne problem. They're all great, and everyone would love to have an offer, and it's incredibly hard to get a singular offer, let alone multiple. We're considering. I'd say generally speaking, but between the three of them, we have more things in common than we probably have that differentiate ourselves, especially amongst some of the other Big Four or other places. But there are small nuances based on the office you're recruiting towards and the people there, the culture, who you meet, what industries they work in, the types of problems they solve, what you're interested in. That can kind of tip the scale. And at the end of the day, it is an incredibly personal decision, and a very big one, that you find these very micro nuances of oh, I met this person and they were fantastic, and I want to be them, and they've had a path that I would want to follow, kind of thing. And so you kind of just have to get into it. And what I would say is you want to give yourself as many options as possible, because again, it can be quite difficult to get these jobs. And when I was going through recruiting at business school, it was obviously you applied to MBB, and then I applied to a bunch of the other firms outside of that. At the end of the day, I was more interested in the strategy and the sort of the MBB workload, I would say, at the end of the day. But again, they're all great places, and one, you shouldn't just think that one is absolutely right for you. There's a lot of really good opportunities out there, and you should be really personal based on what your goals are in life and in your career.
Yeah, I think it resonates to me. I net, and don't think for a second that there's a firm that's good enough for you, because these are hyper competitive. Consultants tend to specialize, generalize, and what does the typical career progression look like? Carl, can I hand it back? You talk a little bit about.
You broke up there a little bit, Evan. What did you want me to talk about?
Progression at McKinsey and specializing versus being a general.
Yes. Yeah. So I think, most of the people at most of the firms, and I can't really speak for, BCG and Bain, obviously, but you're going to come in as a generalist. McKinsey, we do some recruiting for what we call specialists. We have a defense and security specialty. It's very small. I'm talking 10 people a year. We have operations, we have digital, AI, all these different things, but most of our talent, probably north of 90%, comes in as generalists, which I think is probably pretty similar to the rest. And that is really important, because wherever you go, you are going to leverage your background, your experience, but the intent is to kind of put you into this environment where you're going to go see a retail client, and then you're going to go to an oil and gas energy client, and then you might go to a public sector client, and then you might go to a auto manufacturer, advanced industry. You are meant to get a very broad set of experiences, especially within your first year to 2 years, across not only industries, but then problem types, so that be digital or operations, growth marketing and sales, sort of our, it's a grid, if you will, industries and sort of those functions. And what we found is that builds just really good problem solvers. You've seen a broad set of experiences. You are every 8 weeks changing over topics. You're staying engaged, and that has proven to become like very powerful consultants. And at McKinsey, you don't begin to start to specialize until you are a tenured engagement manager, which is between 4, 5, 6 years that you would see that, and then you're expected to know something, whether that be across an industry or a problem, usually a little bit of both, obviously. And that helps you start to, as you become, a little bit longer term within one of these firms, that you're known for something and you become a real expert. I think across all of our firms, the average tenure is less than 2 years for most people, right? It is very much like, hey, you're going to come and you're going to learn. And a lot of people go and they leave. Not, some people don't like it. That could be true, and the lifestyle can be demanding. But a lot of people just have other like experiences and opportunities that they want to go pursue. And it's an incredible launching platform for you to go and like accelerate your career, which is why a bit of like you have that at that 2-year point is a big thing where people start to leave. And so that is why you're very much become a generalist until probably about like that, again, 3 to 4 to 5 year period where you start to be known for something, you start to spend your time. And then surely as you become very tenured and a partner like Evan, you should definitely be known for something at some point. And you're leading, with C-suite level executives and have like a core set of clients.
I can add on from the BCG perspective, very similar to what Carl just mentioned, in that you come in as a generalist and you're really looking to build what we call the consulting toolkit across many different industries. I'll offer from my perspective, I feel like I've had more autonomy in the industries that I've gotten to work with at BCG and have really enjoyed working in the aerospace and defense practice. And that's where I've continued to pick my cases, network with teams, and continue driving work in that direction. So I would say it can be up to your own journey as well, based on the firm you're at and kind of their staffing model. If you have the autonomy to pick and choose and advocate for yourself a little bit more, I think those are certainly options as well, and something for folks to consider again when looking across MBB and what they may want to do.
There's a question in the chat about leveraging your academy experience and academy network. Can you give advice for people that are thinking about consulting, maybe entering business school this fall or thinking about applying to business school? How should they leverage the academy network, and what kind of next steps should they take in the coming weeks to start to make this dream a reality? James, you want to start?
Yeah, I can start us off there, Evan. I just plainly would say get a premium subscription to LinkedIn and like reach out to people from USAFA that are in fields that you're interested in, and you will be amazed by what the response rate is, right? Like I talk to friends of mine who, obviously didn't go to service academies, didn't serve in the military, and the response rate that they get from kind of cold calling or cold emailing people is significantly lower than what you should expect reaching out to people, one with just a military connection, and two specifically leveraging like the academy connection. And you want to start smallest obviously with USAFA grads, but like there's also a network across academies that I've seen be really strong. Just by pure numbers, there are more grads kind of in these spaces from West Point and Annapolis, and they're willing to help as well. It is super helpful as well because there is some kind of basis of commonality. Like they've been in the military, they know kind of what experiences you've had, and they can speak to you in a way it's probably a bit easier for you to digest. They also will be very candid with you. Like they won't sugarcoat anything. They won't lie to you, which is super important. Because I think as Carl hit on and Evan hit on as well, like it's not a 9-to-5 job. Like that should not be your expectation. And there are some weeks that can burn pretty hot. So like actually talking to people that are going to give you a real account of kind of what they're going through and what the job looks like is super important. And you'll definitely get that leveraging, academy networks.
Yeah, I maybe just to add on, what I always tell people is, people reach out on LinkedIn to everyone on here. I'm sure this got a bunch of LinkedIn messages from grads like, hey, want to connect about business school or consulting, what that is. And like, we'll always take it. Hopefully it's in a somewhat reasonable time, not 6 months from now, but like, we'll always take it. But like, it is not as simple as being like, oh, like me and Evan are boys and like, he's going to get me a job. Like that's just not how this is going to work. It says they can tell you about like their experience and like, hey, like how the pipeline works and like, hey, like this is probably what makes most sense and help you connect you with a recruiter. But at the end of the day, like you're going to have to stand on your own merit and do like the case interview and all this prep as well. And so you just need to kind of experience, like understand that, and they will help kind of lead you through that and answer your questions in this very honest way. But it is quite a subjective process. Again, I'll speak for our firm versus all the others, that like, they will not be in the room when they're deciding whether to hire you or not. That's just not how it's going to work. You're going to stand on, how well you did your cases and like how well your behavioral was and sort of what your record is and your experience. So just keep that in mind. I think we went ahead and lost Evan because of his internet issues. And so I'm going to take over for just like the last 15 minutes. Kelsey, James, anything you would add? Kelsey, maybe from the SkillBridge perspective, I know that's somewhat new. I mean, we have a SkillBridge program. I know BCG and Bain both have it now. And we're seeing, multiple dozens of people probably going into each of those programs. But how would you help sort of people navigate that?
Good question, Carl. Like you just said, certainly leverage your network, but you have to be able to cultivate and show the skill set that you can hang, with the full-time employees at each firm, right? Like veterans will bend over backwards to help you. I remember when I was applying for SkillBridge, I was connected with a veteran and he cased with me, upwards of 20 times, just absolutely phenomenal. And I remember asking him, at the end of our sessions, like, how can I repay you? Like, what can I do? And he quite simply said nothing. I just ask that you do the same thing for the veteran behind you who's also recruiting and also trying to learn. And that really resonated with me. And I think it's an attitude a lot of us have, not just USAFA grads, but veterans as a whole. Like, we will help you and we will do the best that we can to prepare you. But ultimately, it's you who has to show up and interview in case and, show your skills. And the SkillBridge bar, I don't think was any lower or different than it is for experienced hires or MBA hires. You just have a shorter time, I think, to learn to case versus folks going through an MBA program or perhaps experienced hires as well. So a different route to get there, but I think expectations are certainly still the same.
Yeah, I think that's probably the greatest myth that I always tell people is everyone thinks you need an MBA, especially from like a top tier school, to like get into it. And sure, like we do see a lot of people come from MBA, but SkillBridge has grown now across all three of these firms, right? Multiple dozens. And then there's also like, we hire a lot of vets direct entry. And so those opportunities exist. And that's where, again, like that network could really help you like navigate that, especially with like the recruiters, because it can be like quite complicated. There was a question in the chat, James and Tyler, about sort of career progression at the firms. And so I'm curious, from your sake at Bain, like how you've seen that, like coming in as, again, like an individual contributor, and then like kind of as you've seen people like grow into that team or not team leader role. What do you guys call it? Your engagement manager or team leader role, manager role, sort of that progression and what that can be like.
Yeah, I'm only 10 months in. I'll let James take that one.
Yeah, I mean, so you do start as an individual contributor, right? You are not expected to join a team day one and run the team because you ran a team in the military, right? Completely different. There is a bit of that kind of restarting at the bottom of the totem pole, which should be expected. But I think you honestly are better off for it. It's a new set of skills. It's a new context, a new environment that you really have to learn. The way it works at Bain, at least, and I'm sure it's similar at McKinsey and BCG's, there are almost like 6-month windows of kind of, the bar for expectation shifts up. So I'm in kind of, I guess, my third expectation window, and now I'm starting to supervise a little bit, starting to own a little bit more of kind of what the work looks like across the team. And I will say, like, it feels a little bit more familiar because it probably feels a little bit more like where I was, I left active duty, but I would not have been at all ready to do this like day one when I started the job. So I think it is really important to just kind of take the ride as you're on it. If you're an individual contributor, like, own that and own the analysis, own the work you're doing. And that will allow you to kind of get to the space where you can start to take on a little bit more responsibility and actually start, supervising and leading portions of the team.
Yeah. Tyler, one of the questions we got here, and I know we were chatting before about some of your work in AI a little bit, but I think, I joined 4 years ago now, and, just within the last 2 years and especially 12 months, this huge shift about what CEOs and C-suite people are really worried about is AI. And like that comes up probably a lot of our work now is helping advise that. Give the audience just a flavor of like what that can look like and how you've sort of navigated that and some of the work you've done there.
Yeah, that's interesting. So when I got here in September, the conversation about AI, like everyone around the office was sort of trying to figure out not only how to use it, but if we should use it. And now, especially all this year, the expectation is everybody should be using AI for almost everything, and not to produce the final answer, but to help you be a thought partner, to help you do your research, and to sort of speed up your or to increase your speed to output. And then how that impacts the client. The client sort of is two different things. One, the client sometimes is expecting a cheaper price because, hey, like, you can do more, but that's not always the case. But they are also expecting a lot from us, quite honestly, because the partners and the APs at our companies are being transparent about the usage of AI with the clients. And then there's not a project where we are not trying to help the client get smart with AI, implement AI, and tell their customers about how they're using AI. So AI competence is becoming a necessity now.
Yeah, I tell everyone, all the new hires that we get, especially the vets, like every single study now is an AI study to some extent.
Yeah.
Like there is a part of AI in everything. Like it's going to come up. The leadership on the other side of the table that, the clients are going to ask about it with what, how are we using it? How should they be using it? It's just a core part of, whether that be manufacturing or sales, anything, it's embedded in pretty much everything we do now. So you kind of just have to get on it and you just have to stay. I know I struggle with it at times and I just try to like beat it into me every single day. Like, hey, how I use it, especially with like some of the younger team members, because it's just such a core part of what we do now in the work. Anyone else questions on AI? If not, I'll close us out here with maybe just a couple of rapid fire questions. Cool. Okay. What as we go close out, what have you seen what has been the most surprising thing about management consulting in the role that you all have each experienced? We'll start with James.
Honestly, I'd probably have to say, and I was talking to a buddy of mine about this the other day. There are a lot of kind of cultural nuances about consulting that are way more similar to the military than I was expecting. I thought it would be like a complete fish out of water. But like everyone that you work with, one, is brilliant, but they're also very motivated And I think that was something I saw a lot in the military. And then kind of on the engagement side, it's run by small teams, right? And yes, there's support that you can reach out to, but like that team nature of whether it's, you know, a flight team or whatever really is very similar to what it looks like to be on an engagement team in consulting, and you're leaning on each other. You know, it's obviously not militaristic, but there is some hierarchy as well. So kind of getting used to, okay, I have to communicate up the proverbial chain. And, you know, if I'm communicating directly to my partner, that probably looks a bit different than if I'm communicating to my supervisor or my senior manager. So, you know, I guess key takeaway is it's probably a little bit more similar culturally than you would think. And that was a big surprise for me.
Kelsey?
Yeah, I'll take the perspective of, you know, kind of like debunking a myth. As I entered management consulting, I came in with this idea that I could not create a sustainable work-life balance. And while I'm not saying it's easy, I'm saying it is doable and it is possible. You have to be flexible and have a lot of creativity. My husband is also a USAFA grad, works in a very busy career field. We have a toddler at home. You know, I travel for work a lot. I'm up late. You can make it happen and you can do it. You just have to be willing to put in the work in a lot of different aspects of your life and come with a team mentality, both at the office and at home. And I found that my managers at BCG have been incredibly supportive. And it's not perhaps as, you know, strict depending on who you work for and kind of what your case load looks like. But you do have to, like I said, be willing to be creative and flexible to make it happen. And I think that's something that, you know, I like to share with people as they evaluate what their work-life balance looks like and is this a possible career field for them as well.
Tyler?
Yeah, real quick. I DM'd Kelsey that answer, by the way. Nah, I was gonna speak on that. You said it well, but one thing I will say, I didn't expect the stakes and the responsibility to be so high so early on. A partner here in this office, our first day here during orientation, he said, "Hey, working here at Bain 1 year is like working 3+ years somewhere else." And that just speaks to the speed and the tempo. I mean, some of my first projects, I'm literally talking to the CEO of a company, and I'm realizing, oh, he's kind of taking my advice. And then I pull up the data. Oh, he kind of makes like 7 figures. This is kind of crazy. The stakes are very high, but you have a great team. You have great leaders here. All of the firms hire very, very well, so we won't let each other fail. So high stakes and definitely a team oriented environment.
Yeah, I think for me, Tyler, very similar. Is one of the things that surprised me is how much impact you could have early on as like a, you know, almost like a brand new an intern, right? You know, I interned with a big, large utility and was helping them on a renewable strategy case. And I kind of just thought, hey, when I go in my internship, I'm just going to like head down helping. I'm going to be such a liability out there. I don't know anything about utilities or oil and gas or energy. And like how could I possibly help in the next like 10 weeks? And, you know, by, you know, week 2, 3, and 4, it is at its core just like problem solving. And if you just like immerse yourself in it and you're really open and you're willing to learn and like utilize the resources and work really hard, it is incredible how quickly you can come up to speed and then start to like have impact on these teams. And that is what, like, in my opinion, this career field is built off of. And so seeing that so quickly and then be like, well, if I could do that here, like I could probably, you know, really help out in healthcare. And boy, I would never want to be there like by myself trying to solve this, but like all the resources that exist and like the experts and, you know, the ability to pick up the phone. I mean, I still talk to Evan, and obviously he works at a different firm, to just like help bring your perspective to the case and solve these problems is quite incredible. Okay. Favorite prep resource, book or website that you used for casing. James, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'll go with Case Coach. that might be a spicy answer because I think Case Coach is kind of based out of Europe. So a lot of their like cases are Eurocentric, but I think they have a really good library of cases that you can just dive into and kind of test yourself and just get used to what that muscle looks like. As I know Kelsey mentioned earlier, but casing is a very unique skill, and you want to, when you're reaching out to people to case with you, be to the point where like, okay, I kind of know what's going on. You don't want to feel like you're wasting people's time. So, diving into those like case repositories is super helpful.
I can go next. I got you. So if you're going to business school, use your consulting club. They have a large book full of cases you can go to. If not, rocketblocks.com, the GOAT. And then the last tip, case with people you do not know to get the real experience.
Yeah, I'll second Tyler. I used Rocketblocks, and then I also used my friends in my network to get those case books from T15 schools, which I also used to help me prep for my SkillBridge interviews, and they were invaluable. So good on you, Tyler. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, what I find is people spend a lot of times doing these full cases, these 40-minute and then, these 20-minute debrief challenges when they should be really focused on just like individual drills. Because if you think about a case, there's like 3 or 4 different components that exist. There's an analytical problem solving, there's a conceptual problem solving, there's some like structuring and framework, and then there's kind of like the presentation and how you do it and communicate those ideas. And I found that like some people are just like, I'll pick on submariners from the Navy real fast. They're so good at numbers and math and really quick on these things. And they'll go through a case and they'll nail that, but they won't be able to communicate some of like the bigger ideas. And I'm just like, well, have you practiced that? And like, no, like I've just been doing these full cases. It's like, well, you need to go in and, like just focus on this one element, and your time is probably better served than an hour just doing like math problems or just doing some like frameworks and like just going through a bunch of them and kind of building that skill individually versus like thinking about this as an all case, because you can, not to be a consultant, but like break it apart into its different elements again and like just really focus and practice those things. And that's how you get above the bar and how you start to get just like really good at these things. And the last thing I'll say on this is, if you enjoy casing and you're good at it, you're probably going to enjoy the job. It is kind of built in this way to some extent, where if you enjoy it and you can get through it and you start to be good at it, it's a pretty good indication that you're going to enjoy the job. So I think with that, Chris is here. Thank you, Chris.
Hey, Carl, thanks to you as well as James and Kelsey and Tyler for joining us on our panel today, and for Evan for moderating, and Carl, again, virtual round of applause for you and the whole group for jumping in when Evan had some IT challenges. So hopefully to our audience today, you got at least a little introduction into management consulting, what education you might need, what paths you could consider, how SkillBridge might help out, and more importantly, how you can use the long blue line and other service academies to pursue this opportunity in front of us, in front of each and every one of you. So I want to say thanks to each of you again. And hey, next month, we'll be featuring our very own Dave Harris on the 20th of August to talk about mentoring. So for those of you considering mentor or management consulting, if this is your next career, if you're interested, continue to follow up with these fellow graduates and explore it. Thanks again for being here tonight, and go Falcons.